You want to fight some dragons in Dungeons & Dragons? Well, too bad. Goblins are all that matter because we're building the Goblin Slayer. And first things first, we gotta pick a race. And the Goblin Slayer is pretty straight up human, so we're gonna take human variant to give us some more flexibility and allow us to choose a feat right at first level. There's a point in the manga and the show where it's actually explained why Goblin Slayer uses the armor that he does. So we're going to choose Medium Armor Master. Goblin Slayer uses medium armor because it doesn't impede his overall mobility while at the same time giving him pretty adequate protection. Medium Armor Master makes it so no matter what medium armor you're wearing, it doesn't impose disadvantage on any stealth checks. But also, most medium armor only allows you to add a +2 from your Dexterity to your overall armor class. Medium Armor Master allows you to upgrade that to a +3, as long as you have at least a 16 in your Dexterity. You also get a free skill with this race selection, so we're going to take Medicine so you can better understand the overall damage being done to the people with you, as well as possibly how to inflict the most amount of damage on a goblin as possible. Then when it comes to a background, Haunted One would be very fitting, considering the overall traumatizing effect of this show, but Goblin Slayer is pretty well known amongst the overall community for his goblin slaying ability. So we're going to take the background, Folk Hero. This gives us skill proficiency in animal handling and survival. And survival is going to be pretty helpful for tracking those goblins. Then when it comes to some starting stats, Goblin Slayer uses a wide variety of weapons while also being able to take a decent amount of hits. So we're going to put 14 points into strength and 15 points into dexterity to be able to make sure we can use a wide variety of melee and ranged weapons. We need to be able to take some hits, so we're going to put 14 points into Constitution, and then you need to be pretty aware of your surroundings. So we're going to put 12 points into our Wisdom and dump the rest, because that's all the points we have thanks to Point Buy from the Player's Handbook. We do still have 2 points left over from our racial selection, so we're going to put 1 point into Strength, bringing it to 15, and 1 point into Wisdom, bringing it to 13. Then when it comes to choosing a starting class, you absolutely hate goblins. You are completely focused on that type of enemy, and there's one class that happens to have a favored enemy, and that would be a ranger. When you become a ranger, you get access to light armor, medium armor, and shields, as well as any type of weapon. You get saving throws in strength and dexterity, and then you get to choose 3 skills. We're going to grab athletics, perception, and stealth. Then the first feature you get when you become a ranger is actually a choice, thanks to some changes that Wizards of the Coast added. You can choose between favored enemy and favored foe. Favored foe is essentially another way to use Hunter's Mark, but without actually using a spell, but it still requires concentration, and this is actually one of the few times I think favored enemy actually works better, because favored enemy is all about you having a significant amount of experience with a certain type of enemy, and that's obviously goblins. You get to choose a type of favored enemy, and goblins aren't on the list. But you can choose 2 types of humanoids, and goblins technically are humanoids. So we're going to choose goblins, and who gives a crap about anything else? This allows us to have advantage on survival checks to help track goblins, as well as advantage on intelligence checks to recall information about them. Even on top of that, you even learn to speak Goblin. As you level up in Ranger, you do get additional favored enemies, but who cares about them? All you care about is killing goblins. Additionally, at first level, you get a choice between Natural Explorer and Deft Explorer. Natural Explorer can be helpful, but it's kind of overly specific to very particular types of terrain, so we're going to take Deft Explorer instead. This grants a variety of abilities as you level up through Ranger, and the one you get at first level is Canny, allowing you to double your skill proficiency in 1 skill. And you want to make sure you're extra aware of your surroundings, so we're going to make that skill Perception. Then at second level of Ranger, you get some spell casting, which you have a very specific amount of spells you can know. However, we'll save all the spells you would know for the end of this build, and you get a fighting style. And Goblin Slayer does tend to focus on more melee combat, while also wielding a shield. So we're going to grab the fighting style, Dueling. This gives us a +2 bonus to our damage rolls with any weapon that we're only wielding with 1 hand, as long as we don't have a weapon in our other hand at the same time. Then at third level of Ranger, you get another choice between the original Primeval Awareness and the new one. The original Primeval Awareness allows you to sense certain types of evil creatures in your area, but goblins aren't on the list, so screw that version, we're taking the new one. This gives us a handful of additional spells that don't count against our overall spells we know on our list, most of them revolving around being in touch with animals and plants, but at higher levels we could technically use it to locate creatures or commune with nature. More importantly, at 3rd level, you get a Ranger Conclave, otherwise known as a subclass. And there's a subclass that feels right because it's called Monster Slayer. However, when it comes to hunting goblins, Monster Slayer is not the best choice, because most of it revolves around a feature called Slayer's Prey, forcing you to designate a creature, and it takes an extra 1d6 of damage once per turn. You then get some additional bonuses against that one target during combat, like some additional defense or some countering abilities, but goblins tend to work in swarms and hordes, and frankly the Monster Slayer subclass is basically a slightly more narrowed version of the older subclass that personally I like better, partially because I'm a little biased because it was the subclass I took with my very first character in 5th edition, but also because it gives us more versatility and overall better options, at least early on in levels. And that's the Hunter Conclave. So that's what we're going to choose. When you take this subclass, instead of Slayer's Prey, you get Hunter's Prey. And while Slayer's Prey would have given you an extra 1d6 against one creature, they have an option called Colossus Slayer, which allows you to add an extra 1d8 of damage once per turn to any creature that you're attacking that doesn't have its maximum hit point. However, there's two other options. One is Giant Killer, and goblins tend to be smaller, and Giant Killer is all about fighting large creatures. So instead, we're going to focus again on that swarm and that horde of goblins. And there's the option for Horde Breaker, and that's what we're going to take, because once on each of your turns, when you make a weapon attack, you can make another attack with the same weapon against a different creature that's within 5 feet of the original target. And this works with melee or ranged weapons. And considering how tightly packed goblins tend to be, having a full extra attack is pretty darn helpful. Then at 4th level of Ranger, you get an ability score improvement. So we're going to go ahead and put 1 point in his strength, helping our overall melee stuff for most weapons, and 1 point into our dexterity, helping most of our ranged attacks, while also giving us the ability to use that +3 with our medium armor master. Then at 5th level of Ranger, you get access to 2nd level spells, and you get the all-important for any martial class extra attack, allowing you to attack twice per action. And if there's some targets close to each other, that means you get 3 attacks thanks to Horde Breaker. Then at 6th level of Ranger, you can choose another favorite enemy, but we don't care about that because all you care about is goblins. And then thanks to Deft Explorer, you get another feature called Roving, increasing your walking speed by 5 feet, and you gain a climbing and swimming speed equal to your walking speed. Then at 7th level of Ranger, you get another feature from being a hunter, Defensive Tactics, allowing you to choose one of 3 options. You can have Steel Will, giving you advantage on saving throws against being frightened, but you're never scared anyways, screw that option. You can have Multi-Attack Defense, giving you a +4 bonus to your armor class if a creature attacks you once and then tries to attack you any more times on top of it. But most goblins tend to be a swarm that each attack once, and relying on their overall numbers, not the amount of attacks per goblin. So instead, we're going to grab Escape the Horde, making it so that way you can weave throughout goblins, and any opportunity attacks that are made against you are automatically made with disadvantage. Then at 8th level of Ranger, you get another ability score improvement. And because Goblin Slayer tends to focus on more melee combat, I want to make sure we focus on that strength, boosting it by 2 points. Then at 9th level of Ranger, you get access to 3rd level spell slots. And then at 10th level of Ranger, you get another feature from Deft Explorer, Tireless. So you can use an action to give yourself a number of temporary hit points equal to 1d8 plus your wisdom modifier, which you can do a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus. And additionally, this grants you a unique bonus that rarely comes into effect, but considering how close to exhaustion that Goblin Slayer pushes himself in order to defeat as many goblins as possible, it might actually be helpful, because Tireless also grants you the ability to reduce your exhaustion level by 1 when you finish a short rest, when most of the time you would be required to do a long rest. Additionally, at this level you have a choice of 2 features, allowing you to take Hide in Plain Sight, so you can spend a full minute trying to camouflage yourself, but that's not going to be as helpful as the other option, Nature's Veil, which is what we're going to take. Nature's Veil allows you to give up your Hide in Plain Sight ability, but instead you can use a bonus action to magically become invisible, along with any equipment you're wearing until the start of your next turn, which you can use a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus. And this is actually pretty powerful, especially in the middle of combat, you can just turn invisible, weave through some goblins, and suddenly strike with advantage because you're invisible. Then at 11th level of Ranger, you get another feature from being a hunter, this time focusing on multi-attacks. While we are focused mostly on melee, and there is an option called Whirlwind Attack that is supposed to really focus on that even more, Whirlwind Attack only allows you the ability to use your action to attack every creature within 5 feet of you. However, between your extra attack and your Horde Breaker, you can probably attack most of those creatures anyways. So instead, we're going to grab Volley, which allows you to use your action to make a ranged attack against any number of creatures within 10 feet of a point that you can choose within your weapon's range. And this will allow you to target way more goblins than Whirlwind ever would. Then at 12th level of Ranger, you get another ability score improvement. So we're going to go ahead and max out our strength, really being able to clobber some goblins. Then we could keep going with Ranger. It would give us some more defensive options with our Hunter Conclave, and then at max level, we'd get Foe Slayer, which feels pretty fitting because you'd be able to add your wisdom modifier to any damage rolls against one of your favorite enemies, aka all the goblins. But we haven't put a whole lot of points into our wisdom, so I think it's more helpful for us to go with a multi-class. And because we don't want to go too magic heavy, because frankly, most of the spells we're going to take with Ranger are going to focus on more preparation to fight goblins rather than some high levels of magic, and most of Goblin Slayer's spell casting ability otherwise relies on spell scrolls, so we're going to go with more of a low magic option and multi-class into Fighter. When you take your first level in Fighter, you get a fighting style, and we already have the fighting style Dueling, so we could take Archery because we want to make sure we're good with absolutely all weapons. However, you do get swarmed quite a bit, so we're going to take the fighting style Defense. This gives us a +1 bonus to our armor class, making us that much harder to hit as we get swarmed by goblins. So if we have the strongest medium armor we can with half plate giving us 15 armor class, we can add a +3 to that from our Dexterity modifier thanks to medium armor master bringing us to 18. We usually have a shield bringing us to 20, and then we have the defense fighting style bringing us to 21. It's going to be pretty hard to hit us if you're just a goblin. Additionally, at first level of fighter, you get access to second wind, allowing you to use a bonus action to regain hit points equal to 1d10 plus your fighter level once per short or long rest. Then at second level of fighter, you get action surge. So now you can use 2 actions in a single turn once per short or long rest. Then at third level of fighter, you get a martial archetype, otherwise known as a fighter subclass. And while you are a champion of fighting goblins, and champion would work pretty well, you are pretty strategic with how you fight them. So instead, we're going to take the martial archetype, Battle Master. When you take the Battle Master subclass, you get combat superiority, giving you some maneuvers, otherwise known as special battle tactics, that you use during combat. You learn 3 maneuvers now, and you can only use 1 per attack, and you spend superiority dice on them. You have 4 superiority dice right now, and currently they're d8s. Then at 4th level of fighter, you get another ability score improvement. And I keep focusing on the fact that Goblin Slayer likes to attack with everything he has at his disposal, and we want to drive that point home with a feat. So we're going to grab Tavern Brawler. This allows us to increase your strength or constitution score by 1, so we're going to add 1 point to our constitution, and this makes you proficient with improvised weapons. So if you pick up any random object, you're proficient with it and you can smack a goblin. This also makes it so your unarmed strikes do a d4 of damage instead of just a flat 1 that you still get to add your strength modifier to. Then finally, when you hit a creature with your unarmed strike or an improvised weapon, you can then use your bonus action to attempt to grapple the target, which, because of the brutality of this show, you just beating somebody with some random object, then grappling them just to beat them more mercilessly, feels pretty fitting. Then at 5th level of fighter, you would get extra attack, but unfortunately this first extra attack does not stack with your existing extra attack from being a ranger. But then at 6th level of fighter, you get another ability score improvement. And we have an odd number in our constitution and wisdom, so we're going to go ahead and add 1 point into each of them. But at 7th level of fighter, you get more stuff from being a battle master. You get to learn 2 additional maneuvers, you get 1 more superiority dice to spend, and you get the feature, Know Your Enemy. And you would definitely know a lot about goblins, so I feel like this fits. If you spend at least 1 minute observing or interacting with another creature outside of combat, you get to learn additional information about its capabilities, but only compared to yourself. So you get to know if they are equal, superior, or inferior to you in regards to 2 characteristics. Either their strength, dexterity, or constitution scores, their armor class, their current hit points, their total class levels if any, or their fighter class levels if any. Then at 8th level of fighter and 20th level overall, you get 1 more ability score improvement. So we're going to go ahead and take a feat. At this point, we want to make sure we have tons of health because we need to just dive into a goblin nest and go in swinging. So in order to be able to survive that, we're going to take the feat Tough. This gives us an extra 2 hit points per level of this overall build, which at max level, that means an extra 40 HP. Now that we've hit max level, let's tackle those maneuvers and spells. You have a total of 5 maneuvers you can learn, and the most helpful for you are going to be things like Riposte. So if a creature attacks you and misses, you can use your reaction to expend 1 superiority die and make 1 melee attack against that creature, allowing you to add the superiority die to the damage. Another very powerful one is Menacing attack. Goblins generally don't have a lot of wisdom, and Menacing attack forces them to make a wisdom saving throw, and if they fail, they're frightened of you until the end of their next turn. And being frightened is actually pretty powerful, meaning they can't willingly run closer to you, and any attacks they try to make while they can see you are going to be at disadvantage. And considering you're the Goblin Slayer, it makes sense for them to be a little scared of you. Then you want to get a bit more tactical with things like Trip Attack, allowing you to knock a creature prone, and any melee attacks against a prone creature are going to be at advantage. Then as far as any other maneuvers, you can throw in whatever you want, but if you want to know what I would choose, just check out my character sheet on Patreon, because there's some I feel would be fitting, but you can choose whatever you'd like. Then when it comes to those ranger spells, you can learn 7 spells on top of the free ones you get that are up to 3rd level. And like I mentioned, we want to make sure that it's focused less on high magic stuff and more about preparation and battle tactics. So we're going to grab the tried and true ranger spell, Hunter's Mark, which just makes it so you always know where a particular enemy is and you can deal some extra damage against them. You can set up a trap with something like Snare, stringing a goblin up in the air ready for you to attack them. You can zip past a bunch of goblins and strike without worrying about any opportunity attacks, while also getting some bonus damage with Zephyr Strike. You want to help yourself and all of your party members sneak silently into a goblin den with Pass Without Trace, giving your entire party a +10 to their stealth check. Then when you are attacking from range, you would have probably picked up a few magical items while you were in town to help you use the spell Flame Arrows, just to shoot some flaming arrows. And then the other great choice for an explosion of lightning, you're going to want to grab Lightning Arrow. Any other spells I'll make sure to throw on the character sheet on Patreon, but I think you generally get the idea. This build was requested a handful of times in the comments, so if there's any build that you want to see, let me know down there. And if there's anything you do differently about this build, let me know down there as well. I took this suggestion from the comments and actually put it up for a vote over on Patreon, and it came in a very close second, so I felt it only necessary to make this build soon after what came in first. If you want the ability to vote on future builds, as well as access to all the character sheets and other random stuff I can think of, feel free to check out my Patreon, linked in the description down below, just like all of these incredible people. If especially my player character patrons, Godzilla Khan, Robert McKibben, Jensen Santiago, Mugen, Elisa Martinez, Anthony McDonald, Panda Milkshake, Alistar Nix, Ted Z, Digimit, Andrew Nobles, Karkat Kitsune, Z13, Viral Nervar, Kesta, The Dino 21, Chris Moke, and Benjamin. Then on top of that are the Dungeon Master patrons that I actually play D&D with: Shane Gilroy, Daniel Sweeten, Conman ZX, Cyberciety, Talon Starkey, Demiurge, Braden Aldridge, Daniel Galvin, Michael, Eric Wade, Salvador, Devin Happy, and Kilo Kilo. Then going above and beyond anything I ever imagined is my god tier level patron, GameStake. He helps me more than I ever expected, so a special thank you to him. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, let me know by hitting that like button, and I'll be here hoping you roll at least 3 nat 20s in your next D&D session, especially if you want to go in and slay as many goblins as possible as Goblin Slayer in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition.